Hello, Wipe Out Homophobia. I decided to make my own little video kind of telling my story. It says about equality, but I watched your first entry and I was very impressed with it. And I just kind of wanted to share my story from a different perspective. A couple little things about me. My name's Erie. I'm a college student. I'm bisexual, and a Christian, which is great. So my kind of story, I guess, I didn't really grow up in a conservative home. I grew up Christian, but we never really went to church. My education about Jesus came mostly from tapes with Bible songs on them that we had, and that's kind of how I learned about, God and Jesus and all that wonderful fun Christian stuff. But my parents were, they were pretty relaxed about religion, which is, I think, was good, because I think if you force your religion down your children's throats, then that's tends to achieve the opposite effect of what you want. So that was great. And one of my friends invited me to youth group when I was in elementary school, and I started going to this youth group every week. And I had a lot of fun, and it was a blast. And then it was Awana, if any of you are familiar with that, and that only goes through elementary school, I'm pretty sure, unless I'm remembering wrong. But then one of my other friends, who is actually my best friend in the whole entire world now, once invited me to be a part of her passion play at her church, and that's how I got involved with this church that I'm going to talk about. I was in the passion play. I've always loved, singing, theater, art, music. I'm actually a music major, so woo! And in 6th grade, I was extremely homophobic, which is rather ironic considering my actual orientation, but I got very much into what a lot of people consider the religious right, the, ultra-conservative, it's a choice, blah blah. This was right around when Massachusetts passed this gay marriage amendment allowing gays and lesbians to get married, and I was so mad about that. I was like, that's not what God wants, that's a sin. Everything you've ever heard come out of a Christian's mouth about that. So that's kind of who I was, and I'm not proud of that, but in a way it's kind of given me a position to empathize with people who think that way. It's kind of like, okay, this is kind of a stretch, but it's kind of like the Westboro Baptist people. Part of the appeal of being in that church, I've heard, is, the idea that I'm going to heaven, and my friends are going to heaven, and everybody else is going to hell, and that's okay. The whole exclusion of other people. It was great. And then, due to a series of events, I discovered that I was actually attracted to girls, and you can imagine how much of an impact that had on myself, realizing that I was actually one of the people who I was rallying so hard against. That was very troubling for me, especially being, 13, 14 years old. But eventually I came to terms with myself and God. That took a few years, but I eventually did. I was proud to be a Christian and proud to be gay at the same time, and that's where I am right now. But I guess kind of the point of this video that I'm making is my church that I was involved in the passion play in. I went almost through middle school, going through there, all of high school. I went to this church and I loved it. It was my family, it was my community. It was, you know, it was wonderful. And then the ELCA, Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, passed a amendment to their constitution, I believe, that came out in support of gay marriage and openly gay pastors. And the leaders of that church did not like that at all, and they decided to do the democratic thing and let the congregation vote. There were two options. One, either this church would stay as an ELCA church, and all the leaders would go up and move and start a new church somewhere else, or the church congregation would vote that this church would become a part of the LCMC. I don't know what that is, but it's another denomination of Lutheranism, and then the leaders would stay there. And the church voted, and they voted to stay with the ELCA. Woo! So that meant that all of the leaders, the entire staff, left and started a new church. And it didn't affect my church life so much, because this happened shortly before I left for college. I believe the last service that they had as a leadership with the old church was like the day before I left for college, so it didn't really affect my decision, but it definitely affected my view of the church and church leaders. And I came to college my freshman year 2 years ago, really not looking for any kind of church relationship, just because I felt so excluded by these people who I'd come to know as my family. And so, long story short, I did not look at all. I was like, I will talk to God on my own terms. I believe that He loves me. I know that He loves me. It's whatever. You know, I kind of thought that pretty much every church organization that I would come across here, 200 miles away from my hometown, would be the same kind of deal. But I happened to stumble across an organization called Lutheran Campus Ministries, and I was invited to come to the Lutheran Campus Ministries house by a friend, and I kind of just fell in love with the community first, before I fell in love with anything else. But I met some of the best people I've ever met in my life, and then I got to know the pastor, who is my other dad, and his name's Pastor Randy. He's absolutely wonderful, and I was really, really afraid. I was hanging out in the Rainbow Room, or as they call it here, the Rainbow Dragon. Woo! That's our mascot. And he saw me in there, and I was suddenly very afraid of what he would think. You know, would he guess about my sexuality? Would he, you know, I knew I was going to be probably accepting a leadership position in Lutheran Campus Ministry soon. What was he going to think? And he actually told me that he's a friend of the Rainbow Dragon, and that really put me at ease. But I was still very afraid of coming out. Some of my friends in the music program here knew. Some of my friends that I had met just in other classes knew, but hardly any of my friends from Lutheran Campus Ministries, and actually at this point none of them knew. And it was really hard for me, for the first time in pretty much my life, to have hide who I was on a very consistent basis. But last year, my sophomore year, Pastor Randy and I had a discussion. It started off, I'm a peer minister for Lutheran Campus Ministries now, woo! And I'm actually living at the Lutheran Campus Ministries house, woo! And so, yeah, I fell in love with this community here. But we were having a discussion about the leadership and the peer ministers and how we thought that was going, and it kind of turned into, he said, well, is there anything you want to say to me? Just, you know, we're alone, now's a good time to say any concerns that you might have. And I ended up coming out to him. And it was one of the scariest scariest things that I've ever done in my life, honestly, because I knew that I couldn't, you know, I didn't know if, you know, he was a friend of the Rainbow Dragon, but what did he think about gay people being leaders in the church, and what did he think about, you know, and he said that was okay, and that was such a huge weight lifted off my shoulders that it's been wonderful. So I guess the point of this is, well, I'm a nerd fighter, so, and John Green put it probably the best way that I could think of, that being the person that God created you to be cannot and will not separate you from God's love, and that's been absolutely wonderful. I'm saying a lot, but it was really a life-changing thing for me to be able to be who I was on both ends of the spectrum. Because it used to be I would hang out with my gay friends who weren't necessarily all that religious, and I would kind of hide how much I was involved in the church. And then on the other hand, I would be really involved in the church and have to hide, you know, talking about my ex-girlfriend, and, you know, all of that. And now I feel like I can be myself for the first time in a few years, and it is so wonderful. So that's just kind of my little story. And it's been a ride, definitely, but I wouldn't trade my experiences with either of these two separate parts of me for the world, honestly. I've now founded a church, an actual church in the area, not just Lutheran Campus Ministries. I found a church in the area that I really feel at home at, and they said, actually, it's today's Sunday, so I just got back from church, and they said something like, we believe that no matter who you are, where you come from, how rich you are, how poor you are, what you've done, where you've been, you have value. And that was really important for me to hear. So that's my story. I hope you liked it, and that's really it, I guess. And oh my gosh, I forgot the most important part. I got introduced to Wipe Out Homophobia by my pastor. So thank you, Pastor Randy, for that. It's wonderful. And thank you guys for what you're doing for people like me, and people who aren't like me. Thank you, because the support that I've met through Wipe Out Homophobia has been absolutely incredible. I love you guys. And even though I'm not on, you know, your message boards or whatnot every single day of my life, I read what you post, and you're wonderful. So, thank you. Peace out, guys.